I'm with Dr. Sanjay Baru, former editor of the Financial Express newspaper and former media advisor to Dr. Manmohan Singh, former Prime Minister of India, and Mr. N. Ram, former editor-in-chief of the Hindu newspaper and director of the Hindu Publishing Group. And today, of course, we're talking about the big media story. Raids on the BBC's offices here in New Delhi and in Mumbai are still continuing. It's been over 24 hours. The income tax authorities came into the BBC's offices in both these cities at about 11:30 a.m. on Tuesday, and they were there overnight. Computers have been seized, phones of journalists have been seized. Evidently, the raids are being carried out under Section 133A of the income tax rules, but nobody really knows what's going on. So may I come to you, Dr. Baru, first and foremost, as a former journalist, as a current journalist, you write columns all the time. What is your take on what's going on?
Well, I mean, my take is very simple, that this action is, the timing is very, very shady. It comes soon after a documentary of the BBC on Prime Minister Modi, and therefore the timing raises serious questions. Second thing is, I find it very odd that telephones of journalists are being seized. If the accusation is about tax payment or transfer pricing issues, I can understand their records being checked and then the financial staff being interviewed. Why the journalists working at BBC should be subject to any form of harassment when they have nothing to do with the financial side of the functioning of the firm really beats me. So I conclude from the manner in which this has been done and the timing of this action this is one more of those steps taken in the recent past against The Wire, against Dainik Bhaskar, etc., to tell the media that there are certain things, there are certain red lines.
Like what? What are these red lines, Sanjay? Dr. Baru?
Well, clearly the red lines are no criticism of Prime Minister Modi, none at all.
So, Mr. Ram, what are these red lines? If, as Dr. Baru is saying, that it's okay, the question to you, what are these red lines?
Yeah, I think if you criticize exactly what he said, if you criticize the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and particularly his role in 2002 during the anti-Muslim pogrom in Gujarat, and then if you explore what I would call the genetic connection between 2002 and today, what's happening to Indian Muslims, especially post 2019, which was the theme of the British BBC's documentary, the 2-episode documentary called India, the Modi Question, then that's a super red line for them. And all this talk about the Supreme Court being dishonored or undermining the integrity and sovereignty of India is just what it is. It's complete nonsense, because there's nothing against the Supreme Court. I watched the 2 episodes very closely several times, and there's absolutely nothing except to say they set up an SIT, and the SIT found no evidence for prosecution of the then Chief Minister of Gujarat. So that is the real red line. And the fact, and they didn't really bother with trying to block the episode 2 of their documentary. So it was clear to everybody that the red line was questioning this the 2002 role and so on. And yeah.
So let's just take all these points one by one. The first is that actually nobody's been told. We haven't been told in the media, or the people of India haven't been told why the BBC is being raided. They're talking about, like you said, Dr. Baru's transfer pricing. I don't even understand what that phrase means. But if, Mr. Ram, as you say, that this is probably related to the BBC documentary on the Gujarat riots, more than 20 long years ago, what is it that is making this government so sensitive that you cannot criticize what happened in the Gujarat riots? You cannot criticize the alleged involvement of then Chief Minister Narendra Modi. What is it that that the media in India and abroad cannot criticize? Mr. Ram?
Yes, you don't quite know what because they did these so-called surveys under Section 133A and Section 133B of the Income Tax Act of 1961. It is supposed to be limited to business premises only, but were they limited only to business premises? Does a survey give you the authority to take away phones of journalists and so on? If that information is verified, it's clearly illegal as well, apart from being anti-democratic. But so I think, so it's not just a highly credible organization. Of course, that hurts the most, like the BBC, which I'd say is the most credible media organization, internationally speaking, because of its track record. Although we have plenty of differences with the BJP's coverage of this or that, criticism, biases, etc. But it's, if a highly credible organization does something like that documentary, then that becomes intolerable for this government, which is a government of censorship. It's not a government of total censorship, such as we witnessed during the emergency, but creeping censorship, selectively targeted at certain critics. If a critic is highly credible, then that's an inviting target. So that's but if it's also a news click or news laundry, or of course, Dainik Bhaskar is a very big player in Hindi language journalism. They also used, the same technique. But this business of the survey is the bottom of the hierarchy for the income tax department.
Okay.
Then comes a search,
Right.
under Section 132 of the Act, and so on. But these are really raids carried out in surprise, element of surprise, meant to scare people, to keep them in the premises and so on. So maybe nothing will come out of it at the end, but the process is the punishment, as lawyers say.
Right.
And that's what they're trying, but it's very, very ill-conceived. It's very, very foolish and over the top to take on the BBC like this. Soon after that documentary was, so whatever you say, everyone links it with that, with what was made available only to UK viewers.
Right.
In India, you
didn't even see it in India.
A few people would have seen it, because sooner or later, BBC studios would have been taken down for copyright reasons, copyright infringement. But this is what they call the stress and effect. If you try to suppress something in this kind of way, then the whole thing becomes, big. Many more people see it. And in this case, it happened mass screening, students wanting to see it, being detained.
Yeah.
Everyone I know has either seen it or will see it soon.
Absolutely. But let me ask you, Dr. Baru, the question that I'm asking you both. What is it? Why is it that you cannot criticize the Prime Minister? Now, you've been former media advisor to former Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh. Was he never criticized? And when he was, were you guys really sensitive about the fact that, the media or the press is criticizing?
Well, I think it's an interesting question. First of all, if you look at the episode 1 of the BBC documentary, one of the interesting points that comes through is the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, the Chief Minister, says, when he's asked, what is it that he feels he has not got right, or some such question, he says the one or what regret does he have? That's right. He was asked, what is your one regret? He says, my one regret is that I have not understood how to control the media. He actually says that, right? And we have seen over the last several years a very effective method of controlling the media. Now, it's a very selective approach. The mass media, major television channels, major Indian language publications. So I think the interesting thing is that at home in India, already the Prime Minister Modi and the government have succeeded in ensuring self-censorship on the part of media. We don't often talk about this. But I think what I worry about as much as governmental pressure on the media is the ready self-censorship that a lot of publications and television channels are happily imposing on themselves. I have been a victim of this myself when I was told by a certain editor when I wrote something for the newspaper or magazine that, can you avoid saying this? I said, why? No, it's better, just delete these 2 sentences. Now, that is self-censorship. That means it is not something that's been published and somebody in government is angry. It's the editor who's saying, don't say it. And I think a lot of that is happening at home.
Mr. Ram, do you agree? Do you agree that journalists like us are self-censoring ourselves? Are you self-censoring yourself?
I'm not. I think I'm not, because I have evidence of that. And I don't think Sanjay will either. So, but to a very large extent, that is being practiced. That is the case.
But
right now.
Why?
The fear of these raids. You don't want these surveys. You don't want these searches. You don't want arrests which have taken place of journalists, or worse, because some of these thugs have also resorted to killings, and so on. So people are afraid. But on the other hand, there are still spaces, which is why this is not an emergency. There are spaces for us to have a discussion like this. We've had many such. I've had with Karan Thapar, I've had with Rajdeep, and so on. And I'm sure Sanjay has his own spaces where he can express freely his position. We are responsible also. We know what, how to be lawful when you write. But we certainly speak up. So, but to a large extent, it happens in media organizations. Also, those with business interests,
right,
are worried about this. I think
so this connection between the business interest of the media organization and the fear by the owner or by the proprietor that his or her business interests could be hurt. You think that is a valid reason for this self-censorship?
Not acceptable reason, but understandable. That's what I'd say. Because this. But on another point, Jyoti, if I may come in, you mentioned Dr. You asked him the question, but
please come in. Yeah.
Dr. Manmohan Singh, whatever differences one had with Dr. Manmohan Singh, I'll give this to him. Never have he faced any pressure, let alone this kind of awful attacks or assaults under his government. And I would go back and say it didn't even happen with Rajiv Gandhi's government during the Bofors investigation. We had a free hand.
Nor with Atal Bihari Vajpayee.
Pardon? Yeah.
Nor with Vajpayee.
Yes, nor with the Vajpayee government. Absolutely true.
So Rajiv Gandhi, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Dr. Manmohan Singh. What about Indira Gandhi? Do you guys remember that? She imposed the emergency, after all.
I didn't write anything that would warrant attention from Indira Gandhi at that time. I was opposed to the emergency. I worked in my own way. But certainly, organizations, including the one I come from, buckled under the threat. There's no doubt. I mean, that's a fact of history. But that was different. It was the emergency when there was total censorship and so on. But I would give Dr. Manmohan Singh the highest marks in this respect. He not only would I think he would feel squeamish. It would go against his grain to try to enforce censorship on this. However unhappy he may have been with something we wrote or somebody else wrote. But I think those were good traditions. Indira Gandhi, that was, some Congress people would say it's an aberration. I don't think so. There was an autocratic tendency at that time as well. But that's different. It would be a category mistake, I think, to compare the emergency with what's happening today, because there are still large spaces in India. India cannot be totally controlled, or free speech across India cannot be totally controlled, however hard they may try, despite this pervasiveness of self-censorship in the established media, in the legacy media in particular.
That's a fair point. Sanjay, can I ask you about Dr. Manmohan Singh when you were his media advisor? I mean, he was pretty much battered on a lot of issues, whether it was on the Indo-US nuclear deal at the time, or whether it was India's relationship with Pakistan after the 2008 Mumbai attacks. How did you guys deal with the criticism?
The criticism was taken as part of the freedom of the media. I mean, I don't think anybody in government even, I cannot recall even one time that anybody, not just Dr. Manmohan Singh, but anybody around him in the Prime Minister's office would say that, we should teach somebody a lesson or we should go after somebody. Never. And I keep reminding my friends who are now in the BJP, who were then in the media, many of them were very vocal critics of Dr. Manmohan Singh. I mean, Arnab Goswami and Navika Kumar, who are in Times Now, let me name them. Very, very severe critics of Dr. Manmohan Singh in the period when I was there. I mean, I left, as you know, Prime Minister's office by 2009. But in that, even in that period, Arnav had just come into Times Now. They were carrying a lot of stuff on their channel which was critical of the Prime Minister. I never picked up the phone and asked them to stop doing that. You know, I would pick up the phone certainly and ask them why they were doing that, to understand, you know, what is the motive behind something. But I would never say don't do it, you know. And I was never asked not to do it. I mean, Mr. Ram is absolutely right. Dr. Manmohan Singh, you know, it's not in his DNA. But I would say the same thing for his two predecessors. I don't recall in Narasimha Rao's time. I was in the Economic Times during Prime Minister Narasimha Rao's Harshad Mehta scam. I mean, it was one of the biggest challenges he faced as Prime Minister, when all of us on a daily basis were reporting the entire scam. Sucheta Dalal was in the Times of India and she was writing in Times. I was in the Economic Times, we were writing in the Economic Times. Nobody ever stopped us from publishing. The entire Harshad Mehta scam was covered by the media with complete freedom. And again with Mr. Vajpayee, I mean, the Tehelka tapes, for example, happened during Vajpayee's time. The Bangaru Lakshman and all those incidents. Did the Vajpayee government, terrorize the media? Certainly not. I think part of the problem for at least our generation in the media is we got used to those 20 years from 1991 to 2014, 25 years of relative freedom. I know people forgot the emergency. The emergency was a distant memory. And then suddenly you come across a regime that is so sensitive, so unwilling to tolerate criticism. And as Mr. Ram said very correctly, there are still spaces. I mean, the very fact that you're recording this conversation suggests that you feel free to do so.
Right.
But a large part of this is in the English language. I'm not sure how much of it is there in the Hindi language, particularly in Hindi. I'm sure in Tamil Nadu, where the BJP is still not that powerful, maybe in the Tamil media, there's a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
Just as there is in the Telugu media, I can tell you in Telangana and Andhra, the Telugu media is not scared of Delhi. But where Delhi exists in the local media, particularly in the Hindi media, and that is why Dainik Bhaskar was targeted.
But let me ask you, Mr. Ram, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Prime Minister of India from the BJP, Narendra Modi of the BJP, Prime Minister of India. Mr. Modi very often sort of considers himself an inheritor of that legacy. But what is it about them? You said that Mr. Vajpayee didn't have any problem being criticized. And you remember when it was under him that India went nuclear in 1998. And there was a lot of criticism about that, including in your own newspaper at the time. So what is it about Prime Minister Modi of the BJP which is different from Atal Bihari Vajpayee?
Yeah, in fact, Prime Minister Vajpayee, despite our criticism of the even opposition, editorial opposition to the BJP's agenda, was good enough to come for our 125th anniversary celebration as a chief guest and lauded the newspaper in large part. So that was Vajpayee. We had absolutely no problem with dealing with him. You could meet him, etc. But to be fair to Mr. Modi, when he was chief minister of Gujarat, I had a number of interactions with them, although our newspaper didn't really matter in Gujarat, but he kept in constant touch. And there are some occasions where, we were able to have our way. In fact, I can say it now, the privilege motion against I think Gujarat Samachar was dropped because I intervened and asked, made this request to Chief Minister Modi, and he quickly dropped it. It's when this transformation came to Delhi and became a prime minister, with the opposition weakening like this and BJP becoming dominant, with other strongmen, home minister and all that coming there together, with the RSS being able to advance and put forward its agenda with what they call the second coming of Hindutva. It's then that all this began to happen. Awful things happened in Gujarat to Muslims, and also it started with Godhra. That's in the documentary also. But so far as the media were concerned, I wouldn't have complained very much about what happened in Gujarat with Chief Minister Modi, as far as I know. I could be, because that privilege motion was dropped. I don't think there were police actions against media in Gujarat at that time, because the BJP felt weak. Now they feel strengthened or empowered to do all these anti-democratic actions.
But so
use
empowered.
these agencies.
No, but do they feel so empowered that they can feel insecure? Do you think that they're insecure about the fact that people are criticizing them, and therefore they're cracking down on organizations like the BBC or the Dainik Bhaskar, News Laundry, NewsClick?
I think so far as the BBC is concerned, they would be insecure because this reaches a global audience. And I would like to connect this to an outline of a framework that Mukul Keshavan suggested in an article in The Guardian. I have it right here before me on screen. Narendra Modi is struggling to be both anti-Muslim strongman and global leader. And this particularly applies to the time of our presidency of G20.
That's right.
Published on, please read that, published on, those who haven't, February 8th in The Guardian. It's freely accessible. The point he makes is there are contradictory messages being given to the domestic audience and the international audience. On the one hand, here, by proceeding against the BJP and the BBC and demonizing the BBC, the way that spokesman did the other day, using vulgar language against.
He used the words brushed, and he used the words bhrishtachar and bakwas. So these are 2 or 3 words he used. So corrupt and bakwas, like no nonsense.
And so that would presumably appeal to a large section of their domestic constituency. But internationally, it hurts. This action hurts. So there's a contradiction between wanting to be an anti-Muslim strongman and global leader, particularly in the time of G20 presidency. But even outside that. So, and this contradiction cannot be resolved because they catch up. The message you're giving here catches up there. Your actions have an impact abroad as well, and it hurts your image. You're now being seen in the company of the Turkish strongman and the Hungarian strongman and Sisi, who came here as an honored guest during the Republic Day of Egypt. So I think that's the problem he's facing. I think the Prime Minister and his government.
So Sanjay, Dr. Bharat, that's my next question to you. India is the leader of the G20 this year. We are in the middle of the G20 celebration, and as we all know, the G20 is the 20 largest economies of the world. This is not a mean achievement. For India, a developing country, to lead the G20 is a big deal. So why would the government of India, Prime Minister Modi's government, why would it do something like this, crack down on an international media organization at a time like this? Won't they send absolutely the wrong signal that the world's largest democracy is cracking down on the media?
Look, first of all, we are hosting one annual meeting of the G20. It's not a big deal. Last year, Indonesia did it. Next year, Brazil will do it. The year after that, South Africa will do it. It's by turns. Every country gets to host the G20. So it's not a big deal that suddenly India is hosting G20. It's a different matter that this government has decided to use the G20 as a way of, projecting itself as a kind of Vishwaguru, global leader, etc. And the fact is, Jyoti, the Prime Minister and the current regime in Delhi is riding on a great opportunity provided by the world to India, which is that the world's great powers are fighting each other. And in a context where the US and China and Russia are all kind of fighting each other, India as a country, it's nothing to do with who the Prime Minister is. India as a country has acquired this opportunity to once again be the voice of the global South, which is what we were in the 50s and 60s during the Cold War when the US and the Soviet Union were at loggerheads, right? That space given by big power conflict, which had kind of gone away.
But surely India is leading that space, and that's what this leader...
India is leading it. Of course, India is leading it because right now we are hosting G20. But the point I'm making is that the Prime Minister is riding on a wave that is India's wave. I mean, even if he were not the Prime Minister, if Devegowda were the Prime Minister today, India would have this opportunity. Because
it's not, listen, we have to give him credit. It's Prime Minister Modi's leadership over the last 9 years before that, when he inherited the mantle from Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was in power for 10 years. Yes, you're right. It's India's leadership, but Prime Minister Modi is today at the helm of India. So therefore, he's leading our country.
No, please let me finish what I'm saying.
Sorry.
Because it is that opportunity that he thinks the global, the international community will not criticize him for what he's doing. I mean, you're buying Boeings from America, you're buying Airbus from France, you're buying weapons from Russia, you're allowing China to run a huge trade deficit. You're literally buying up friendships, and you're giving aid to several other countries, you're giving COVID vaccines. So there is an environment in which many countries are dependent on India, which is a good moment for India. I mean, let's face it, there's a sweet spot. I mean, if you look, the geopolitical analysts use the phrase, India is in a sweet spot. Of course, we're in a sweet spot. So I think he thinks, okay, I can do what I like with BBC, but Rishi Sunak is not going to, back off on whatever, he wants out of India, because this is an opportune moment for India.
Do you agree, Mr. Ram?
Yes, I largely agree with that. But you are scoring, some people would say, an own goal. I would use the word acrasia, going back to old Greek philosophy. You do something you know is wrong. You do something that you know is against your own interests. So why do it? So I can't understand why they did it. It makes no sense to me. It's a comedy of follies. First trying to block something that would have been taken down anyway, which would have been seen by fewer people, and then doing this. Claiming that it's is it a survey or a search, or
does this damage India's reputation?
Of course, it does.
The world's largest democracy.
It damages the reputation of the Modi government. It's not just India. India may still be separate, differentiated from the Modi government, because there is opposition in India to what has happened to the BBC. We speak up for the BBC. Whatever differences we have with the BJP, this censorship and this harassment of the BBC in India is totally unjustified. It's anti-democratic. It's unacceptable to us as Democrats. So in that sense, there is a clear differentiation between the image of the Modi government and what the opposition is saying, including the Congress party, which has come out very strongly against the latest action against the BBC. So I think certainly it's hurting. It's a real blow to this image at this time. Because you read the editorial in the New York Times about 3 days ago on the same question, or the articles that have been published in The Guardian. And I bet that every major media organization in some way or the other has expressed some critical opinion on it, on how you have dealt with this documentary and the sequel to it.
So, Dr. Barood, the point that Mr. Ram is saying that this is damaging or will damage or has damaged India's reputation, Prime Minister Modi's own reputation as a global leader, and the fact that India is celebrating 75 years as a democracy. I mean, we have muddled through in many ways. There has been an emergency that Indira Gandhi imposed for 2 years and some months. Now, my question to you is that this democracy that, how do people abroad then look at India's democracy?
Well, we are not just 75 years. We are supposed to be the mother of democracy. According to Mr. Modi, democracy goes back into ancient India. And that is the point. I mean, we call ourselves mother of democracy. We say, Hinduism is the most pluralistic religion in the world. There is not a religion of the book. Many ideas flourish. There is different, strands within the religion. So even an atheist can be a Hindu. There is at one level this entire argument about the liberalism of Indians' heritage. On the other hand, there is this intolerance. And I think the two don't sit together. If you believe actually that the Hindu religion and philosophy is a truly liberal philosophy because it's not of the book, it has multiple faiths in it. There is Shaivism, there's Vaishnavism, there's Dvaita, there's Advaita, etc., etc., etc. Then you should allow 1,000 flowers to bloom. I mean, to quote Mao Zedong, or 100 flowers to bloom. I go up to the BBC. I mean, I'm not defending, incidentally, I must add here, I'm not defending the BBC's journalism. In fact, in the past, I have criticized the BBC when they were, for example, referring to terrorists as militants and saying, how can you do that? I mean, you call chaps who go to New York to 9/11 as terrorists, those come to Bombay as militants. I mean, this is not acceptable, right?
Right.
So it's not the journalism of the BBC that I'm defending. I'm just saying that don't harass media. It does a competent job or an incompetent job. There are many ways in which you can draw attention.
So what is this insecurity about, Dr. Baru?
Well, I think we've gone over this question again and again. Frankly, I cannot understand what the insecurity is. Here is a government that has an absolute majority in parliament that can just do about what it likes to do. Why is it suddenly insecure is a baffling question. Is it that they feel that the ground is shifting from below their feet? Is that the assessment, that the ground is shifting? And therefore, you need to keep the faithful with you because there's a lot of disillusionment even among the faithful. Those who are the kind of the Sangh Parivar, as it was, or the Bucks, there's the questions. People are unemployed. Middle class unemployment has gone up after COVID. There's inflation. So is it that people are asking the question, what is this Amrit Kal all about? Where is the Amrit in the Amrit Kal?
Mm-hmm. Mr. Ram, you referred to this earlier in our discussion, where you said that the BJP is in a majority in parliament, very powerful party. The opposition, the biggest opposition party, the Congress, is far weaker than it ever has been in its history. Do you think that's one of the reasons why the Prime Minister, his party, his government is coming out with these sort of raids or searches or surveys or whatever we might call them, and using a rocket launcher to sort of kill a fly, if you like? Is it because the opposition is so weak?
I'm more persuaded by what Sanjay just said. Is the question, is the ground shifting under their feet? And I think this yatra, Rahul Gandhi's yatra, surely has made a difference. I don't know what kind of difference it's made, but nobody in recent memory has walked from Kanyakumari to Kashmir, doing these distances, talking to people, and really make an impact. Whether they can capitalize on it, the opposition or even the Congress in this case, I don't know. But certainly that is a major factor on the Indian political scene. And the question is, do they feel that the ground is shifting or has shifted under their feet already, given the difficulties referred to? I think that's the relevant question today. I think that the insecurity is highly likely to be related to that, rather than their feeling of great self-confidence, assurance, or even arrogance for that. Maybe they're getting worried because things suddenly change. Jyoti, you've been in journalism long enough, and I longer, and we've seen people who are at the top of the tree suddenly fall, and when the fall comes, it'll be like this rather than like this. So we don't know. Maybe we are hoping that this authoritarian regime will not stay much longer. Many of us do. I do, certainly. Or authoritarianism will disappear. We want democracy to flourish. Only then India can do well globally.
Yeah.
And for our people as well. But is that happening? And that's a relevant question. We'll watch it in the next several months, whether the ground has really shifted under the feet. We've been wrong before. But this is the question that I'd be most keen on following.
Well, we have 1 year left for the next general elections. So I suppose journalists like yourselves and me, we will be watching this space, and we will be reporting on it freely, fairly, without fear or favor. And notwithstanding what's happening to the BBC, I'm not sure whether the raids are still on or not. But I think we all agree that this is a highly unfair thing to have cracked down on a media organization, whether it's the BBC or any other Indian media organization. But thank you both so much, Dr. Sanjay Baru and Mr. N. Ram, for joining me in this debate, not just on the BBC, but on freedom of speech and expression in the media as guaranteed by our Constitution. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti.